What is it that divides civilization from barbarism? I refer to civilization as people who are civilized, who work and struggle to make society more just, more egalitarian, struggling to have more freedom and less corruption, people who respect laws and rights. More values, dignity, ethics and moral. In this thought I am going to use words that we were taught when we were little kids, a bad person and a good person. As a bad person I mean a person who unjustifiably harms others, and as a good person I mean someone who wants the good for everyone and never breaks the rules, that make a society fair and egalitarian. By barbarism I mean people who are bad, who seek unfair advantage, want to benefit from someone else's damage, and seek their short-term benefit by jeopardizing the long-term benefit of society, who wants to see others suffer, that others do not progress, even if they do so in compliance with the law, that has bad manners, etc. They are people who want to misrepresent the system and manipulate it for profit. They do not comply with the rules, the laws, and through corruption they try to get away with their crimes. They are not respectful. Have you ever thought why there are rich countries and poor countries? Have you ever thought about the reasons that lead a country to be poor or rich? Do you think that it is just luck and that a country is blessed or condemned only by the natural resources found in its territory? We can see that the answer to the last question is no. The resources of a country do not always guarantee the wealth of its people, because if that were the case, Venezuela and Argentina would be rich countries and they are poor countries. On the other hand, the United States and Dubai have large amounts of natural resources and they are relatively rich countries, because those resources are well managed and are not stolen. In this thought, we are going to assume that the main characteristic of a rich country is that more than 80% of its population has a medium or high purchasing power, and it has less than 5% poverty. And a country is poor when more than 20% of its population lives below the poverty line. Which I just said is not reality, are just quick definitions for us to understand the realities of some countries. There are countries in which people live with $1 per day, people do not have basic services covered, the streets are made with dirt, there are permanent wars, between civilians or guerrilla groups formed by religious or drug traffickers, there is no safety on the streets, there are high levels of crime and it is even difficult to find a job to get money and give a good quality of life to your children. Why do you think there are countries in which everything I just mentioned does not happen? Such as United States, Germany, Switzerland, Canada, etc. In these countries the level of unemployment is very low, people have high purchasing power, good health and free higher education services. Many times, it is hard for me to realize why there is so much difference between some countries. In poor countries you may think it is because the geographical area is bad. For example, if a country is in a desert, it is difficult for vegetables or cattle raising to be sustainable, so people cannot eat. There are times when people justify the poverty of a country because it does not have great natural resources, or perhaps because it is an island that is isolated from the world, etc. The reality is that, if we review history and today data, there are countries that are moderately or highly rich and have the same natural characteristics of countries that are extremely poor. Then we must ask ourselves, what happened here? The main reason why bad things happen in the world is corruption. Corruption is the first step and the main door to all kinds of problems, small or large, short-term and long-term. The main enemy of the human is the human, because the main enemy of a good person is a bad person. Corruption refers to criminal acts committed by authorities who abuse their power and influence to make an intentional misuse of resources to which they have access, anticipating their personal interests or those of their relatives, to obtain an illegitimate advantage, generally secretly and privately. No matter how great the benefit the criminal has, if he or she steals an orange it is wrong, and if he or she steals $1 million it is also wrong and must be severely punished. Those resources belong to other people. Corruption is so natural in humanity that it has different levels. If 10 friends got together to eat and one is in charge of the purchases, and the food costs $100, each person must pay $10, but if the person who made the purchases says that the food cost $110, each person will contribute $11, so the person who bought the things will get $9 extra and the food will have only cost $1 for him. He made a profit because someone else got robbed. Despite the fact that the theft in this situation is low, it already indicates that that person is bad because it harms others. The levels of corruption are infinite. It can be seen in countries like China, Argentina, Venezuela, etc., in which public officials withdraw large amounts of money from public funds or have used their power to benefit certain public officials instead of the people. They subjugate the people for their own benefit. One of the most common acts of corruption is when the government raises the price of the goods or services that the state must buy. For example, if the government has to build a bridge, and the construction will cost $100 million, the company charges $110 million in exchange for the granting of the construction permit, and the owner of the company is obliged to give the public official $10 million. Many people say that the fault is also with the owner of the company, and the truth is, yes, but 90% of the fault is the public official responsibility because he is the one who has the final decision on whether there is corruption or not. If the public official wants to obtain a bribe, but the employer does not want to, the employer will have to leave to make way for another entrepreneur until someone agrees to pay the bribe. If the official public does not want any corruption, the chances of a corrupt situation are 0% and all entrepreneurs will be working with transparency. The entrepreneur who does not want to pay a bribe will lose the opportunity to do the job and his financial situation will be harmed. If the entrepreneur accepts the process of corruption, he will harm all the other companies, and will allow to create bonds of corruption that will become increasingly more difficult to break as time passes and the corruption reaches more space in society. With these examples we can see how easy it is for people to fall into corruption. Greed and ambition are the worst enemy of civilized society. The world is full of acts of corruption that harm society day by day. It can be in low amounts, such as people who steal little money but do it permanently, so over the years their wealth increases secretly and that does not change largely the lives of people in the society. But when a person steals large amounts of money in a small society, as in various countries in Africa, society is severely damaged, and levels of poverty and misery skyrocket. The reality is that it is very difficult to control corruption. The biggest responsibility is up to each person to decide what decisions to make, whether they are good or bad, if they have values, dignity, ethics and moral, or do not have them altogether. That should be what education must do, to train people to fight for the common good, to achieve stability, long-term benefits and make society have higher levels of ethics, moral, wealth and happiness in a sustained way in the world. There are also certain processes that discourage or encourage acts of corruption. It is the responsibility of public officials to ensure that these processes are rigorously carried out to reduce corruption. The most corrupt countries tend not to do the things that need to be done, such as making economic activities possible, creating environments that facilitate commercial activities to create wealth, provide good health and education systems, etc., because the more cultured it is the people, most they demand from their rulers. In a country where there is little corruption and things are done well, things move forward. There are no impediments to make new reforms as long as they are promoting progress in civilization, but when there begins to be certain levels of corruption and politicians become corrupt, they begin to create networks of trust and debt among them, which involves them and plunges them further into corruption. Two clear examples of this are Venezuela and Argentina, which, at the beginning of the 20th century, were relatively rich countries and are currently poor countries, with more than 60% of the population submerged in poverty and misery, with development indexes human, freedom and purchasing power, similar to African countries. For all these reasons, corruption is the main evil of every civilization and must be eradicated, like a virus that must be eliminated before it spreads to uncontrollable levels. The fight against corruption must be the most important fight any country has, from Denmark to Haiti. In countries with high levels of corruption, over the years, people begin to see civilization degrades and begins to have problems becoming more wild, as high levels of crime, corrupt judges, impunity when people break the law, lack of basic services such as drinking water and electricity, because companies do not receive the investment they need to provide a good service because the money is destined for populist expenses. For this reason, the country's happiness rates drop drastically. As can be seen in the different rates of happiness country, there is a relationship between countries regarding levels of corruption and levels of happiness. Many of the happiest countries have lower levels of corruption, and the most corrupt countries are those with the most unhappy inhabitants. Corruption, and specifically the fact that a person is aware that the taxes he paid with much effort are spent in a bad way or stolen, greatly affects in a psychologically way. Some of the countries in which its population is happier can be the Nordic countries, New Zealand, Canada, Switzerland, Singapore, etc., and these same countries have very high happiness rates. Some of the countries with the less happy people in the world are, for example, several countries in Africa like South Sudan, Mozambique, and countries of Latin America like Venezuela, Bolivia, etc. Corruption has always been the main enemy of the human being since the beginning of civilization. It continues to be so today, and it will be until the last day of our existence.